Daniel pulled 47 pounds of tomatoes off 2 plants last August. 2 plants. No fertilizer bag, no fish emulsion, no Miracle Grow, no soil test kit. His father did it the same way. His grandfather did it the same way. And in a few hundred Amish farms across Pennsylvania and Ohio right now, this is just how Tuesday afternoon looks. Most American gardeners have never heard of this recipe because it can't be patented and it can't be sold, which means the agricultural supply industry has no reason to mention it, and the extension offices stopped teaching it sometime after the Second World War. I've been making it on my own land for 22 years now. Stick with me to the end because there's one cheap kitchen scrap Daniel insists goes in the mix and almost nobody includes it. Let me name the specific thing that happened because I'm not asking you to take a conspiracy on faith. After 1945, the United States had a problem on its hands. The munitions plants built during the war to make ammonium nitrate for explosives had nothing to do once the fighting stopped. So the government and the chemical industry did the sensible business thing. They converted those plants over to making synthetic fertilizer. Same chemical, different label. And in 1947, the USDA Extension Service began retraining county agents to push standardized bagged fertilizer with a guaranteed analysis label. 10, 10, 10, 5, 10, 5. That whole numbered world we all grew up with. Fermented manure teas, the kind Daniel's grandfather had been making in a bucket for 60 years already, got quietly dropped from the extension bulletins. Not because they didn't work, because they couldn't carry a guaranteed analysis label and they couldn't be standardized into a bag that a dealer could sell. That's not a theory. That's the structural economics of it. And the result, all these decades later, is that the average American home gardener now spends somewhere between $80 and $120 a season on fertilizers and amendments for a modest backyard plot. Daniel spent zero. His father spent zero. His grandfather, who was farming the same plot before the USDA even existed, spent zero. I want to be straight with you. I'm not telling you there was a meeting in a back room. I'm telling you, an industry built on selling bags has no reason to teach a recipe made from weeds, manure, eggshells, and the water that falls on your roof. The recipe survived in communities like Daniel's because those communities never bought into the bagged fertilizer economy in the first place. All right, let me tell you what the recipe actually is. Daniel calls it the brew. That's the whole name. No fancy term, no proprietary label, no trademark, just the brew. It's a fermented plant and manure tea that sits in a 5-gallon bucket for 2 to 3 weeks and then gets poured at the base of every hungry plant in the garden. And I'll be honest with you, when the first time he told me about it, I thought he was kidding. I'd been gardening for 13 years at that point with the same bags my father used. 10, 10, 10 in the spring, side dress in July, maybe a bag of bone meal for the peppers. I had 7 dust under the kitchen sink and a rototiller in the shed. My results were fine, not great, not terrible. Then came the summer of 2003, blight on the tomatoes, hornworms I couldn't keep up with, aphids on the peppers, squash bugs taking down the zucchini one plant at a time. By August, my garden was a war zone, and Daniel's, less than a quarter mile away, was overflowing. I walked over one evening with a 6-pack of root beer, because old order Amish don't drink alcohol, and I asked him point blank what I was doing wrong. He looked at my garden, then at his, then at me, and he said, "You're not doing anything wrong, Bill. You're just fighting the wrong war. You don't have a pest problem. You have a soil problem. Fix the soil and the pests will fix themselves." And then he walked me over to his shed and showed me the bucket. That bucket is where the brew has come from on his farm for as long as anyone in the family can remember. I've been making it on my own land for 22 years now. That's the kind of thing the Extension Office stopped handing out sometime after the Truman administration. Now let me explain how it actually works, because once you understand the mechanism, you understand why the suppression couldn't fully kill this. The brew does not feed the plant. I'm going to say that again because it's the part most American gardeners get backwards. The brew does not feed the plant. The brew feeds the soil biology, and the soil biology feeds the plant. Daniel told me one afternoon, standing over the bucket, "I don't feed the tomatoes, Bill. I feed the ground. The ground feeds the tomatoes." That single sentence took me about 2 years to really understand. Here's what's happening in the bucket in plain English. The aged manure brings in a population of bacteria and fungi. Billions of them, more diversity than anything you can buy in a bottle. The fresh comfrey and nettle leaves, when they sit in water, dump potassium and nitrogen and a long list of trace minerals into the liquid as they break down. The yarrow flowers add their own compounds. Daniel says yarrow is the herb that teaches the brew how to behave. The eggshells, crushed up, slowly release calcium, which is what keeps tomato bottoms from rotting and keeps cell walls strong. The hardwood ash dumps in potassium and a fistful of trace minerals you'd otherwise pay for in a bag labeled micronutrient supplement. And the fermentation, the slow, steady, daily stirred fermentation, multiplies the beneficial microbes hundreds of times over. When you pour the diluted brew at the base of a plant, you're not dumping nitrogen onto the roots. You're delivering a living culture into the soil. Those microbes set up shop around the root zone. They form partnerships with the mycorrhizal fungi already there, and together they unlock nutrients the plant could never have reached on its own. That is something you cannot put in a bag. You cannot patent it. You cannot standardize it. You cannot stamp a guaranteed analysis label on it, because the analysis literally changes day by day as the culture matures, which is exactly the kind of thing an industry built on bags and labels has no reason to teach. All right, let me give you the recipe, ingredient by ingredient, the way Daniel gave it to me the first time. You want a 5-gallon plastic bucket, not metal. Metal will react with the brew as it ferments. 5-gallon plastic, clean enough, but not sterile. Into that bucket goes 2 shovels of aged composted horse or chicken manure. Aged is important. Fresh manure is too hot. It'll burn the culture. Daniel uses horse manure from his own barn that's been sitting a year. If you can find a horse farmer or a backyard chicken keeper within 10 miles of you, that's your source. On top of the manure, 2 generous handfuls of fresh comfrey leaves. If you don't have comfrey, plant some this spring. 1 root will give you all the comfrey you'll ever need, and then some. 1 handful of stinging nettle, wear gloves. 1 handful of yarrow flowers, the white kind growing wild in any roadside ditch around here will do fine. A fistful of crushed eggshells. Don't worry about washing them. The membrane is part of what the microbes eat. Then a half cup of hardwood ash scooped out of your wood stove if you have one, or from a neighbor's if you don't. Then you fill the bucket the rest of the way with rainwater. I want to be straight with you on this one. It has to be rainwater, not chlorinated tap. The chlorine in municipal water will kill the culture before it gets started. If you don't have a rain barrel yet, set one out tonight under a downspout. A clean trash can will do for a season. Set the lid on loose, not sealed. The brew has to breathe. Stir it once a day with a stick. Daniel uses the same stick he's used for as long as I've known him. For the first 3 or 4 days, you'll see almost nothing. Then somewhere around day 4 or 5, it'll start to bubble gently around the edges. Keep stirring. It'll smell green at first, then a little funky. Then by day 14 to 21, it should smell earthy sour, the way a good silage pile smells, the way a working compost heap smells, not rotten. If it smells like rotten eggs, the culture went the wrong direction and you need to start over. Earthy sour is finished. That's the rule. Now the application. You don't pour the brew on straight. It's too concentrated and you'll burn the roots. 1 part brew to 10 parts rainwater in a watering can. Pour it at the drip line of the plant, not on the leaves, not at the stem, at the drip line where the feeder roots are. You do this every 10 to 14 days from transplant through about the middle of August. After mid-August, you stop because you want the plants to start hardening off and putting their energy into ripening, not into more leaf growth. That's the whole schedule. Manure, comfrey, nettle, yarrow, eggshell, ash, rainwater, 2 to 3 weeks of fermentation, 1 to 10 dilution, drip line every 10 to 14 days. That's it. And that ties directly back to those 47 pounds of tomatoes off 2 plants. Daniel's soil has been on this brew for over 50 years. His father was pouring it before him. The microbial population, the humus structure, the mineral balance, that's not a 1-season effect. That's a half-century of compounding biology. But here's the thing I want you to hear. You don't have to wait 50 years. My own Brandywine tomatoes doubled their yield between 2003 and 2006 after I made the switch. Doubled, same variety, same beds, same sun. The only thing that changed was the brew replaced the 10-10-10. By year 3, my Stamen winesap apple tree, which had been a stubborn shy producer for a decade, dropped 1.5 bushels off a single tree. That's the kind of detail no extension agent has handed out since the Truman administration. Now, if what I'm walking you through here is making sense, and you're starting to see how the Amish do this differently than the way most of us were taught, I want to point you to something. Everything I just described, the brew, the soil biology, the reason healthy soil grows plants that pests don't bother with, that's the engine behind Chapter 4 of my book, The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol. Chapter 4 is called Building Pest-Proof Soil, and it walks through the full mechanism. The book is $17 at backyardbillbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time. I'll wait right here. If you're on your phone or laptop, the link is right there in the description. All right, let's keep going because this is where the story gets interesting in a different way. I want to be straight with you about why a recipe this simple, this cheap, and this effective got buried. I'm not going to dress it up as a conspiracy. It isn't one, it's just economics. The U.S. consumer lawn and garden fertilizer industry runs roughly $8 to $9 billion a year. That's a lot of bags. A 5-gallon bucket of Daniel's brew costs $0 in cash inputs. The manure comes from a horse or chicken. The comfrey and nettle and yarrow grow wild on the edges of any property that hasn't been mowed flat. The eggshells come out of your own kitchen. The wood ash comes out of your own stove. The rainwater falls out of the sky. There is no distribution channel for a product anyone can make from weeds and scraps. There is no shareholder presentation built around something a grandmother teaches a granddaughter for free. So the recipe didn't get banned, it just stopped getting mentioned. It dropped out of the extension bulletins after 1947 because it couldn't carry a guaranteed analysis label, and it dropped out of the catalogs because nobody could sell it. Now, I want to be fair. Synthetic fertilizers work. They work in the short term. They're convenient. Large commercial farms genuinely need them at scale. You can't feed a continent off 5-gallon buckets. I'm not pretending otherwise. But here's the thing. Works in the short term and builds the soil are not the same outcome. One feeds the plant for a season. The other builds a piece of ground that gets stronger every year for 50 years. And here's the math. The industry has no reason to teach you. If you've been gardening for 20 years on bagged fertilizer at roughly $80 to $120 a season, you've spent somewhere between $1,600 and $2,400 on something Daniel's grandfather got for free. And in most cases, you have worse soil structure to show for it than when you started. I know because I did it. 13 years on 10-10-10 before Daniel set me straight. All right, stick with me because I told you at the start, there's one cheap kitchen scrap Daniel insists goes in the mix, and almost nobody includes it. Here it is. A half cup of raw, unpasteurized whey. That's the cloudy liquid that drains off whenever Ruth makes butter or soft cheese in her kitchen, which she does roughly once a week. Daniel stirs it into the brew on day 3 after the initial bubbling has started. Not day 1. Day 3. The reason almost nobody includes it is straightforward. Most American gardeners don't make their own dairy. The byproduct is foreign to them, and the commercial online versions of this recipe, the ones you find on the first page of any search, substitute molasses and baker's yeast because whey isn't shelf-stable in stores. Molasses and yeast work, sort of, but they're not the same thing. Here's why the whey works. It's loaded with live lactobacillus. That's the same family of bacteria in real sauerkraut and real yogurt. When you stir it into the brew, the lactobacillus drops the pH, outcompetes the putrefying bacteria that cause that rotten egg smell, and dramatically increases the live beneficial microbial count the finished brew delivers to the soil. The smell goes from awful to earthy sour. The microbe count goes up. If you don't make your own dairy, the substitute is a half cup of brine from raw, unpasteurized sauerkraut. Same bacteria, different source. Works the same way. I'll be honest with you, I resisted the whey step for 3 full seasons. It sounded silly. I finally tried it on one row in 2006. By mid-July, those plants were visibly bigger than the rest of the bed. That's the kind of grandmother kitchen detail that never makes it into a fertilizer bag because there is no commercial way to package raw dairy byproduct. Before I let you go, I want to come back to one more thing. Once this brew is producing 47 pounds of tomatoes off 2 plants, you've got a new problem. What to do with all that food? That's where chapter 10 of the book comes in. It's called Ruth's Root Cellar and Pudding By, and it's the chapter where Ruth, Daniel's wife, the same Ruth whose whey you just heard about, walks through how she keeps her family eating out of the garden through 3 winters. Root cellar, canning, the sand storage method for carrots, all of it. It's everything Daniel and Ruth showed me over 35 years, organized into one 30-day protocol. The book is at backyardbuildbooks.com. If you're on the big screen, point your phone at the QR code on screen now. Go ahead and pull it up. I'll give you a second. If you're on your phone already, the link's down in the description. So that's the brew, the recipe, and the half cup of whey almost nobody includes. Daniel and a few hundred Amish farms across Pennsylvania and Ohio are stirring a bucket like this on a random Tuesday afternoon right now, and now you're in on it too. Next time we'll talk about how Daniel stores enough rainwater off one barn roof to carry his garden through an August drought without ever turning on a hose. Drop a note in the comments and let me know how your first batch goes and what you smell on day 14. I'll see you in the next one.